Good evening and welcome to A Slice of Life. Tonight's topic is dam removal. The removal of ancient colonial era, industrial era dams that are no longer serving their purpose, they're obsolete. And our dam removal expert tonight is Emily Hedzopoulos? Hedzopoulos. I'm sorry. Hedzopoulos. And she's from the Nature Conservancy. She is the freshwater restoration project manager for Nature Conservancy. Emily, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started in the dam removal part, let's learn a little bit about your background.
Sure. So
how did you go from high school to right here?
It's a great question. So originally I'm from Long Island, New York, so just across the Sound.
Right.
And probably like most people across Connecticut, I grew up playing in and around the water often. I grew up going to the beach and exploring, seeing horseshoe crabs and shark eggs and seaweeds and all sorts of neat stuff.
Yeah.
And from there, I really grew a deep appreciation for kind of just how special and a unique place that we live in, kind of being up here in the Northeast and in and around Long Island Sound. And from there, I actually have spent most of my professional career around Long Island Sound. So,
excellent.
Yeah, I've worked with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection on their Blue Plan, which is a marine spatial planning effort for Long Island Sound. I've worked on Long Island restoring rivers and protecting wildlife. I've even worked on the vineyard industry on Long Island, looking at how vineyards are impacted by coastal climate change. So, yeah, so from all the different experiences, Long Island Sound and its watershed is a really near and dear place in my heart, as you could probably tell. And I'm just so thankful that now I get to work here at the Nature Conservancy in Connecticut, protecting and restoring our freshwater systems and rivers across this really unique and important state.
Now, is dam removal the only thing you're involved with for the Nature Conservancy?
Great question. So dam removal is one of the things that we look at. It's kind of like a really holistic understanding of our freshwater environment, but we're also really involved in road infrastructure and how that intersects with our rivers. So oftentimes you probably see, when you see a road and you cross a river, you're either crossing a bridge or a culvert, or what's called road stream crossings.
Right.
And those can often create barriers to wildlife and also be at real risk of flooding and overtopping, as we've seen, unfortunately, in a lot of the recent intense storm events. Those can be really put to the test.
Right.
So that's another thing that we really take a good look at. And we also look at a variety of other things, including freshwater wetlands and how those are kind of being preserved and restored around the state. We also look at floodplains and kind of how those are being managed and how those are functioning. So we really just want to make sure that our freshwater systems are serving their best purpose for both people and wildlife.
Let's get into dam removal now. Mm-hmm. We have a picture of a dam, or a lake, I guess, created by a dam. Mm-hmm. And here's the map. Let's do the map.
Sure.
What do these dots mean?
Sure. So those dots are actually dams across Connecticut and the New York portion of Long Island Sound. And what's just fascinating is that Connecticut has one of the highest density of dams in the country. And as you mentioned, because of kind of that early America era, when many dams were built to power mills or industry, this is pretty much what we've created.
Right.
And a lot of them, as you mentioned, are now obsolete or no longer serving their current use. And there's approximately 5,000 dams here.
I bet it was kind of like the colonial era people, where they just, you had a couple of tools, you lived by a river, you could throw up a dam and start making power for some.
Yeah. And I think one of the most interesting things when you actually look back at the history, that sometimes when these dams were built for that purpose of mills or industry, they weren't always that popular, which I didn't even realize until I kind of read up on it. Sometimes they were actually even destroyed, or people tried to dismantle them because they actually stopped and blocked migratory fish passage, which these migratory fish species like alewife or shad were so critically important to a number of different communities across the state.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned shad, because in my work at the transfer station, I've met several commercial fishermen, and they would go out fishing for shad. And maybe I was just a little clueless, but it just never occurred to me where the shad need to go
Yeah.
to do their spawning and then
Yeah.
come back out to sea and do whatever they do. And so I thank you for that. Now this is, what are we doing here? There you go. So now what is this? This is a lake? This is clearly
Yes. So
before
yeah,
dam removal? I would
This is
say?
before. Yeah. So this is a picture of a lake, the area what called Rainbow Reservoir, made by Rainbow Dam,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
just an example of really when you build these dams, and sometimes these are larger scale dams. So these
Yeah.
dams might serve a different purpose.
Right.
Maybe they were for hydroelectricity in this case, or perhaps they were for water supply often, or other kind of uses that create kind of this larger scale impoundment. So whenever you do build a dam, often you will have kind of this larger scale impoundment behind it. And this is what is usually a result of that.
And this pond is called an impoundment? Mm-hmm. Okay. In dam talk?
In dam talk, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
And part of the reason I wanted to do this show is to tell people that even though this looks nice,
Yeah.
it's really blocking some valuable fish
Yeah, exactly.
from doing their spawning thing. So
Yeah, exactly. And that is what is just so incredible to kind of understand, so that a lot of our migratory fish species across Connecticut, across New England, including shad and alewife, they need freshwater habitat in order to spawn.
Right.
And when they don't have that, you can imagine that their population just incredibly decreases and can just decline over time. And we're seeing that, unfortunately, with a lot of the dams that have been
now,
built.
when the dam is there, and every year the dam is there, the fish would come back up, they'd look for a little stream, and then they'd go find one downstream from the dam?
Yeah, so there's a number of things they could do. They could spawn earlier than the dam, so downstream of the dam, like
Right.
you mentioned. They could go into some other, freshwater systems. Sometimes on these dams too, that there are fish ladders built, so actual physical ladders that fish can climb and move up and over dams. However, unfortunately, a lot of the fish ladders don't really work that well in some instances, or maybe they only work for one species, so they could be particularly only
Oh.
built for one type of fish. So
Oh,
they
wow.
don't serve all fish.
Yeah.
So really, a lot of times, one of the best options for ecological connectivity is to remove the dam. So you're basically taking out the entire barrier to fish and other species as
Right.
well.
Now, the last time I checked, there was a dam in Old Saybrook, very small dam, and there was a fish ladder on this dam. And of course, the beavers came and they blocked up the fish ladder. So it was kind of like a net
Yeah.
loss there.
Well, that's another kind of just great example of oftentimes when you have these dams, and even if you build fish ladders on them, they entail increased maintenance over time. You
Right.
have to keep maintaining them. So that is actually an economic cost
Oh,
that
I didn't
comes
know
with
that.
dams and fish ladders.
Yeah. I thought once you set it up, it was good to go.
Yeah, well, no, like you said, you have to maintain it. You have to make sure the beavers don't clog your fish ladder so the fish can
No
get up.
beaver.
Yes, exactly. Or even other debris, can often get into those fish
Let's
ladders.
look at the fish we're talking about here.
Sure.
Or the lady. Here we go. Now these are alewives, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And tell us about, that's an Andromenus?
Yes, yes. So it's an anadromous fish species, also known as diadromous. So anadromous fish kind of fall into two categories, catadromy and diadromy. These fish species are really neat. So they grow and live a majority of their life out in the saltwater, so out in the ocean environment.
Right.
But they come back to spawn in our freshwater streams. So it's kind of similar to, most people know, a great example of this is the salmon. Right?
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Yeah.
Exactly. But what's so just neat about alewife and a lot of our other migratory fish species is they actually are the foundations of our food chain.
Oh.
So basically, they're called forage fish for a reason, because everything can forage on them, eat them. So everything from whales, dolphins, sea otters, ospreys. Basically, when you increase their populations, you can, create these snowball effect of just like great ecological benefit when you improve their populations.
I've seen a couple of shows, and I watch any nature show I can. And so I guess fish like this, they get in, the predators round them up into a ball, and then start eating the ball until they're all gone. That's amazing. And let's go to the shad picture, shall we? There we go. There's the shad. And the shad do the same thing, correct?
Yeah, no, very similar in lifestyle and to the alewife as well, and in a very similar way. Also, foundation of the food chain.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Can we go to the before and after shot? Please? There we go. Now, tell me about this. This looks kind of beat up or something.
Sure. So this is an after shot of a dam removal,
Yep.
Pond Lily Dam in New Haven. And I think what's most important to remember here is one of the kind of myths about dam removal is that it's going to look eternally like this or eternally like a mud flat or kind of just messy.
Right.
And that's actually not the case. Rivers are incredibly like self-healing.
Yeah.
Once you take the dam out, they can really return to their natural state decently quickly. So you can see here that sometimes it could just take a matter of weeks to months before you start to get some regenerative kind of plants and other species coming back and filling the system. What's also so neat here is that often when you have a dam, there is a great seed bank basically under that pond.
A what?
A seed bank, what we call a seed bank. So basically a collection of seeds that's just sitting in the ground underwater, waiting to sprout again once you remove the dam.
Right.
And then once you remove the dam, those seeds and those plants now have a chance.
It's time to go.
Basically, to grow up. And
Right.
what's also so neat is oftentimes, if that dam was there perhaps for tens, hundreds of years, that seed bank is also that old. So you take the dam out and then you're getting sometimes these rare or incredibly like native species of plants that perhaps you haven't seen in an area
Wow.
in a little bit. Because you're creating
that I
new
wasn't aware
environment.
of.
Yeah, really neat.
Excellent. Very good. Now let's go to the after shot. Now, one of the reasons I was intrigued by dam removal is because there's different groups will plant native plants there.
Yes.
And I'm very fond of the native plant movement. And so this looks like it has been planted.
Yeah, so probably in some circumstances when a dam is removed, you often will let it just regenerate itself. But sometimes you might give it a little help.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might go in and you might plant some natives or just make sure that the banks are stabilized.
Right.
The stream will kind of, carve its own channel. Kind of, water, I will always say, water will go where it wants to go.
Right.
But also, you basically will just, get this really nice ecosystem that unfortunately we also have to make sure that we keep invasives at bay.
Right.
So we also sometimes have to go in and manage, unfortunately, for the invasive species or the species that are unnatural in our system and come over and kind of take control. So those are the two kind of management techniques, at least for the plants that we will kind of do after a dam is removed.
Now, I have a question. So let's say year one, we take the dam out and the first migratory wave comes in and it's probably small from past years. How many years transpires before that river or that stream bed is up to capacity with spawning fish?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes it can happen relatively quickly. Sometimes it's just in a matter of a couple years.
Wow.
That population can really jump up because you have to remember they've been waiting there, right? They've been waiting at the base of the dam. And one great example actually is Bride Brook at Rocky Neck State Park.
Oh.
So that brook actually is the largest alewife run in the state. And previously, the mouth of the brook had twin pipe culverts that kind of similar to a dam. It didn't block them completely, but it really narrowed their passage. So they really couldn't move freely into the upstream habitat like they wanted to.
Wow.
However, once they put a bigger culvert in, they opened up the stream, the population numbers jumped even the next year.
Yeah.
And then over the next couple years, it jumped to about 400,000.
How marvelous
Yeah,
is
alewife
that?
down. And originally, before they made that improvement, it was about 50,000 to 100,000 fish a year. So that is just a miraculous improvement that you can see, as you mentioned, just from either opening up a barrier or removing a barrier like a dam. It can make an incredible impact.
Now, did they put the big culvert in to help the fish, or was
They
it
did.
some engineering thing that had to be done?
So they did basically put the culvert in to restore the fish passage.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent, very good.
Yeah.
All right, now, so far we've been talking about the positive aspects of dam removal, and there's many. Are there any negatives?
Well, I would say perhaps not negatives, but perhaps some myths maybe around dam removal. So, I think some people maybe get a little fearful that, people are looking to remove all dams. And that's not the case.
Right.
There are a lot of legitimate dams across our state that serve an economic purpose.
Right.
However, there are many dams that don't serve an economic purpose and also have a really high impact to the local ecosystem and also come with a big cost of maintaining them over time and a safety risk as well.
Right.
So what we're looking to do, the Nature Conservancy as well as a whole group of practitioners, we actually have a practitioner network called the Long Island Sound River Restoration Network, of which the Nature Conservancy is a proud member of. And we're all looking together to see how we can prioritize these dams
Right.
for removal. So basically identify which ones would be the best candidates for removal and then look into the feasibility of removing them.
Now, I've gone on a couple of hikes in the woods and stuff, and occasionally you'll find this really tiny stream that somebody put a pile of rocks in,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it created a very tiny pond or behind it, and would we want people to go there and just take the dam down themselves, or is there some kind of reporting procedure we should do?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. Trout Unlimited actually has a great program at this. They have what's called, I believe, their Rivers app, and people actually can go out when they're on walks and report these. So these are actually called ghost dams because that they're not usually on they're not on that big map.
They're not on
right?
the map,
because
right.
we don't know that they're there because they're often small, or maybe
Right.
someone put them in years ago, or someone just decided to be
small
fun.
landowner did it. And
Or,
didn't
some
tell
kids,
anybody.
yeah, exactly, went out and decided to build their own dam. But we can definitely look at removing them. You probably just need to. You can come to a partner like us. You can talk to your local town and just see if someone would be open to removing it. But you would probably definitely need to at least look into permission first, and just make sure that it is just removed properly.
I guess my concern would be if somebody takes down a little dam like that, or maybe medium, they could get hurt because of all the water pushing rocks behind them and stuff.
Sure, and I will say, dam removal is, we take a lot of very careful thought and consideration whenever we're approaching these projects.
Right.
They take sometimes a couple of years to really move through the process to just make sure we're doing it correctly.
Yeah.
So we really, as a practitioner standpoint, we do take it very seriously to mitigate any impacts or small scale risk that might happen, and just make sure that we're doing our due diligence to follow all state, local, federal regulatory procedures. So
I imagine there's a lot of paperwork involved in something like that.
yes, exactly. Yes, permitting is definitely a part of dam removal.
Yeah.
So I can also say, I often say that there's like 4 stages of dam removal. So identification and feasibility, I kind of talked about that already.
Yep.
The next is design and permitting. Once you determine that the dam is feasible to remove, then you go on to the design and permitting. And that's when, we as like a practitioner often work with an engineering team and the state and local agencies to really just think through, are we following all the proper rules and regulations? Are we making sure that we're doing our due diligence and
Right.
thinking through this removal properly?
Now, in my research, I've seen some excavators come in and
Yes.
remove a dam, and when they're done, it doesn't look like there was ever a dam there.
Yeah.
So is part of the dam removal process to remove the foundation of the dam, just every little big rock
Yeah.
or chunk of concrete?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I often will also call that the third stage of dam removal is the construction.
Right.
So you will have someone going out there, a construction team, to actually remove it. And sometimes that does include things like dynamite. You're not going to see the big, huge explosions, but they might be kind of small, just enough to break up the dam,
Yeah.
just to break it in pieces so that you can have a construction team come in and remove it. And oftentimes, you will have at the base of the dam be maybe buried or structurally buried underwater. So yeah,
Right.
you want to make sure that you remove all that you need to, because the stream bed is going to quickly erode anything. Sometimes too, if it is determined that it's best, sometimes you too will go in and you'll put in different boulders or things just to make sure that you're kind of stabilizing the channel.
Right.
So that's often involved in the construction.
Right, well, there's a dam in Farmington, and they'll probably get this picture in a little bit. It's a big dam.
Yes,
It's got a big pond behind it.
yes.
Is that on the schedule?
I wonder if you're talking about maybe Rainbow Dam, perhaps? Yes.
I'm
maybe.
not sure. It's just your boss lady sent me a picture of this big dam
Yes,
up in
yes.
Farmington, and it didn't look like any bulldozer could take it down or anything.
Sure. So yeah, sometimes with those types of dams, and I will just say for the Rainbow Dam,
Yeah.
that we actually have great partner groups. The Farmington River Watershed Association is a great local partner group in that area, as
Right.
well as Save the Sound. And they are currently in discussions with the dam owner, just assessing all of its impacts and just understanding, what it would look like to make sure that they are preserving the system in the best way
Do
possible.
you find you get pushback from private dam owners when you want to take down their dam?
Sure. So I would say, dam removal can be a really kind of complex issue, right? I mean, sometimes people have a real kind of social or emotional attachment to the pond
Right.
behind it. So sometimes that could be an issue for the private dam owner.
Right.
I think often we just also try to communicate or promote that even if the dam is removed and the pond is no longer there, you'll still have this beautiful free-flowing river
Yeah.
with a lot of benefit to it, you
Yeah.
know? It changes maybe your recreational use, but you can still, you can tube, you can kayak, you can
Yeah,
canoe, you
yeah.
can do all these other things. I will also say one of the great benefits of dam removal to private owners is you're actually reducing their legal risk and their cost
Oh, right,
of the
right.
dam. Yeah, because if the private, like a homeowner owns a dam on their property, they hold the legal risk if that dam fails. And they also hold the
I bet you
responsibility.
that's a good selling point.
Yeah, I mean, if you take that away, then it reduces the cost and risk to that homeowner.
Right. Now, monitoring of the stream post dam removal. Do you also do that?
Yes, yeah, I actually call that like the fourth stage
Oh.
of dam removal.
Well,
so
here we go.
We've covered almost all of them. Yeah, so we call it kind of monitoring and adaptive management. And we actually start it often before the dam is removed to kind of
Yeah.
have that comparison of what the environment is like.
Yeah.
And that kind of monitoring can take a lot of different paths. So you can do things like, fish monitoring, kind of counting the fish, seeing who's coming. You can also, there's this cool kind of emerging technique called eDNA, where you can actually see the DNA in the stream, and then you can see from that like small, like if fish shed their scales or something,
Right.
you can see from the DNA in the water what fish might be in the water.
Oh,
Which is just
wow.
very, very neat. Yeah. So that's another way you can monitor.
never thought of that.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. And then you can also monitor, the bird species, the wildlife. You can also monitor how the stream bed is holding up, if you need to do any more plantings or things.
Now, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you take help from the people? Do you need volunteers to help you do whatever it is that you do?
Sure, we always need volunteers and more people to get engaged in this work, absolutely.
Okay.
Since there's approximately 5,000 dams across
Yeah,
the Long
yeah.
Island Sound watershed, we really could use all the help we can get,
Okay.
multiple people engaged. Either just, go to your local town or, state officials and just talk to them about what dam removal and even road stream crossing upgrades look like in your community.
Right.
If there's a local dam in town, maybe it's being removed, maybe going to the local, public feedback session and just voicing what your thoughts are on the local environment.
Or they could go to the Nature Conservancy website.
That's true too. Yes, they could absolutely also go to the Nature Conservancy
And
website.
I must tell you that I had a really good time perusing your website.
Oh, thank
I found it very fascinating, very, very well done, and just about any question I had, was answered. And so kudos to your IT team. And is there a dam now that you're working on to remove, or are we in between projects? or-
Yeah, so right now, us at the Nature Conservancy, we're actually looking a little bit more holistically as how we can help other partners take on dam removals.
Right.
Are there, learning opportunities and building capacity? But I will say a lot of our partners are working really and doing really amazing work across the state to actively take on dam removals. And perhaps we'll also take on some someday ourselves, but we're also really trying to play that real supportive partner role.
Right, right. Okay, so that about wraps it up, Emily. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks
This has
to
been great.
the Nature Conservancy for allowing you to show up and tell us about dam removal, the benefits, and how many fish species benefit. And I just think it's great. I think it's absolutely great.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well,
Always great to talk about this.
and one of the benefits, I think, of having you on, or the reason why I wanted to do dam removal, is for what seems like a very little effort of physically removing the dam, there's a massive increase in
Yes.
biological benefit.
Yes.
And for that, we have to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's always just really nice to be able to talk about this, so thank you.
That's what I thought. So now, if you want to get involved with the Nature Conservancy, go to their website, natureconservancy.com, I believe, or .org. Natureconservancy.org, I guess /Connecticut. And they are ready, willing, and able to help you help them. Thank you, and that's it for tonight.